Hello everybody, my name is Edgeface. Welcome to the tutorial on how to run the new Emerging Conduits and add some dank ISK in HiSec. First off, let's get into the juicy stuff. How much can you earn from doing these sites? Well, you can earn on average, I would say 100 mil ISK an hour. You can sometimes earn more and you can sometimes earn less. The thing is, often there are more people running these sites at the same time, so multiple people, and this will make so that there's less chance for you to grab all the loot. So this will make your income a bit less. As well, the RNG is a bit of a factor that plays into how much the loot drops. So it can also be so that sometimes you get a lot of loot, sometimes you get bad loot because of the RNG. So taking all these things into consideration, I would say on average 100 mil ISK an hour. Sometimes it can be more, 120 mil, sometimes it can be less, maybe 80 mil. So, but on average 100 mil ISK an hour. And I think that's a really good number for some HiSec activity. So what are Emerging Conduits? Well, Emerging Conduits are sites that can be found on your probe scanner. You warp to these and you can fight Triglavians, and these Triglavians then drop, generally speaking, quite good stuff. They're called Triglavian survey data, and you can also salvage their wrecks, and also they drop pretty good salvage as well. So that's where the ISK comes from. Right now, New Eden is being invaded by Triglavians, and you can choose to fight on behalf of the Edencom, which is the kind of defense for New Eden. So you're with the humans, or you can side with the Triglavians and fight the humans. So if you're running Emerging Conduits, then you automatically are siding with Edencom. So if you do not want to side with Edencom, this is obviously not what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to side with the Triglavians, but this is a tutorial on how to do Emerging Conduits, so you're fighting for Edencom. So we're going to be killing Triglavians here. And how it works is that there are certain systems that are being invaded, and some systems, they go to something called minor victory systems. There's some systems called Edencom minor victories, and there's some systems called Triglavian minor victories. The thing is, with Triglavian minor victories, you can also find Emerging Conduits, as well as finding Emerging Conduits in Edencom minor victories. Only farm Emerging Conduits in Edencom minor victories unless you know what you're doing. This is because in Edencom minor victory systems, these are a lot safer systems. In Triglavian minor victory systems, you'll find a lot more Emerging Conduits. See, we've only got one Emerging Conduit here, but if we were in a Triglavian minor victory system, we'd find lots of Emerging Conduits. The reason is because in Triglavian minor victory systems, they can get these massive fleets of Triglavians warping around, and they can kill you. And they have killed me on a gate before, and I lost a 1 billion ISK Rattlesnake. They're crazily strong. So you really, unless you know what you're doing, do not go to Triglavian minor victory systems if you are killing Triglavians, so you have a bad standing with them. Because if you do run these Emerging Conduit sites, you are going to get bad standing through Triglavians, because obviously they don't like you, they're killing you, you're killing their own kind. But if you are in Edencom minor systems, you should be relatively safe. You won't get these big fleets roping around, or at least not to the same extent as the ones you find in Triglavian minor victory systems. If you want to find systems that are Edencom minor victory systems, you go to this kybernaut.space/invasions website. This is a really good website for finding info on invasions, and you can also find a lot more information about invasions. For example, Triglavian minor victory systems, Edencom fortresses, a lot of other systems. But for the purpose of this tutorial for Emerging Conduits, you want to find the Edencom minor victory systems, and you can find all these systems here. So for you guys who are used to the old Emerging Conduits, then you're going to have to use a different fit, or at least a slightly different fit now. Because the thing is, there was an old type of Emerging Conduit that existed from about the beginning of this year and a bit of last year. And they were a lot easier in terms of how much damage that you have to withstand. Mainly Triglavian frigates and destroyers were found in the old Emerging Conduits. Now you find a lot more battlecruisers, battleships and cruisers, so you have to have a lot more tank now. But the thing is, the good thing about that is that you can apply a lot better DPS, because battleship weapons are obviously going to apply better to the bigger ships such as battlecruisers and battleships. So that is a good thing about the new Emerging Conduits. When it comes to tanking the sites in terms of fitting, you want to have omni resistances, because the Triglavians do different types of resistances. Triglavians are known for doing primarily thermal and explosive damage, but the thing is, the ones in invasions do all the types of damages, because they got, I think, missiles that do many different types. So I'm using multi-spectrum shield hardeners right here, because this obviously gives me resistances for all types of resistances. I personally speaking prefer to run an active tank. You can also do a passive tank, but I like to run an active tank because I can achieve a lot higher EHP per second, and because I can achieve a lot higher EHP per second, I'm able to put a lot more damage modules here, as you can see here. Many people are afraid to use active tanks in these Emerging Conduits because of one thing, and that is newts. Newts is something you must take into consideration when running Emerging Conduits, and in general fighting Triglavians in general. This is because Triglavian newts are exceptionally strong the Triglavian newts will eat your capacitor up like crazy. That is why it'll seem very daunting to run active tanks, because obviously if you get neuted out, you're not able to recharge your shield, while if you've got a passive tank, you will be able to still recharge your shield. So, but the thing you have to remember is that when you are running an active tank, you have an inherently good capacitor. Look here. If I am to turn off my shield booster, I have 134 gigajoule per second. So I have a very strong capacitor, so it's going to be a bit more difficult to neut it. I could maybe pulse my shield booster and you still have capacitor to spare. Along with that, this is the main thing though. I am using currently 3 large cap batteries. Each one of these gives about 20-something% resistance to neutralizing. So just straight off, 24% I think per battery of the incoming neutralizing effect is just removed, just like that. So I already am reducing their neutralizing capabilities a lot. And you can see here, I've got 10 gigajoules per second and I'm using 3 large cap batteries. I have no issues with newts. I have absolutely no issues with newts constantly boosting my shield booster. So that's what my opinion is, that I definitely think you should go an active tank, because you can achieve a lot higher EHP per second. If you have a bit of a capacitor spare along with lots of batteries, you will honestly have no issue with newts here. I mean, you do get newts, but it's not an issue. You won't have any issues with the newts. But if you obviously want to play it safe, you can obviously go a passive tank, but I'll still strongly recommend you use active tank. This here is an example of one of those so-called passive fits. I do not recommend using this because you cannot really have much room to fit enough damage mods without actually making a lot of sacrifices to your DPS. But this is what you do. You'd obviously have like large shield extenders, shield power relays in the lows, and you get a very hefty passive HP per second recharge right here. And I'm using these resistance amplifiers that do not require any capacitor, because see, it doesn't matter how much I'm neuted out, I'll still be able to resist or keep up my tank. And my missiles obviously don't use any capacitor. The only thing I will not be able to use is my salvage, but that doesn't really matter because you can do that after you've killed everyone. I am using now, you can see here, I'm using 3 damage modules, 2 drone damage amplifiers and a ballistic control system. Honestly, it depends on your skills and implants, because I am using high grade crystal implants. These make it so my shield booster is even more effective. So obviously if you're going to use a fit I'm using right now, then and you've got the high grade crystals, these ones here, ignore these ones, these are like extra ones I've got, but they don't really do much to my tank. These are the important ones I'm talking about, the high grade crystals. If you do not have them, then what you would want to do is you'd want to go and probably start off by removing some of these damage modules. And in fact, I would recommend you do this even if you do have high grade crystals, because your skills maybe are not as good as mine, because I've trained out almost maxed out skills for the skills that can affect my ship right now. You'll probably want to have a full low slots of flux coils so that you're extra safe, and then remove some of these batteries and put a shield boost amplifier. So I've got the skills to do shield boost amplified 2s, so you can see here I got a lot more tank. But you can also, if you don't have enough skills, you can also go with the ionic field accelerators. And if you've not got enough CPU to spare, which you should have, to be honest, on the Rattlesnake has quite good CPU, you can go with the Stalwart shield boost amplifier or Stalwart particle field magnifier. They use less CPU, but they are a bit more expensive. You can see here 2 mil, and there's even if you still have problems with CPU, you can also use the Capacitor. This one here uses even less CPU, but costs a bit more. You can see here 9 mil. So those are alternatives. So I'd recommend starting out with this. You can even put a damage control here. Since we've got so much extra capacitor, we could, put a damage control here. That's also a way. So this would be the safe fit. At least I'll link all these in the description. The safe type of fit, the one I use. But you could start out with this, where you're really safe. Obviously you're going to run the site slower because you're not going to have as much DPS, but this is obviously going to be a lot safer. Then what you do is, when you're in the site, you will plop down a mobile depot. Mobile depot allows you to refit on the go, so you can bring in your inventory some items. So you could bring, for example, the shield boost amplifier, as well as some extra cap batteries and the damage mods. So you could bring these damage mods here, the ballistic control system, drone damage amplifiers. And then what you can do is you can refit to the current fit I've got now, which is the one with higher DPS. Then if you feel like your shields are going bad, just replace the low slots, the damage mods, with the flux coils. The flux coils, right? And then you replace some of the batteries with your shield boost amplifiers when it gets like you feel like your tank's not good enough. But personally speaking, with this, I never have to refit at all. I am comfortable with this. But you can start out with the safe fit, and then on the go refit to have more tank if needed. Otherwise, you could also just refit to have more DPS. So that is how I do that. Also, the shield booster I'm using is the Pith X-Type X-Large shield booster. And for you guys who are not as space rich as me, you'd probably want to maybe have an A-Type, B-Type, or even C-Type. But the thing is then, you would probably not have the room to be able to use damage mods like I'm doing. Then you would probably have to have the safe fit, the I'm linked, and then just replace the X-Type with the C-Type, B-Type, or A-Type. So depending on how much money you got to spare, I would strongly still recommend the X-Type because it's not extremely expensive, like 200 mil. The C-Type I think is like 100 mil. So it's not like a huge difference, and you get a lot more boosting from this X-Type. So I personally speaking prefer to fly a Rattlesnake. The reason the Rattlesnake is really good is because in general speaking it has a good tank, it has a very good amount of DPS output it can provide, and it's also using drones. Drones are really good because drones can be used to destroy small stuff as well, because there are frigates and destroyers in these new emerging conduits, just not as much as before. You have a lot more battlecruisers and battleships here. When it comes to other ships, I've seen many people running Dominixes, and I've also seen people using Praxises. They're a lot cheaper than the Rattlesnake. The Rattlesnake is a pretty expensive ship, but I'll still recommend the Rattlesnake because it is pretty good in terms of its DPS output and its range. It's got a quite good range with the rapid light heavy missile launchers. The reason I use the rapid heavy missile launchers is because they have quite good DPS, as well as being able to apply better to the smaller ships, since heavy missiles are better than, for example, cruise missiles. Cruise missiles will hardly do anything to small ships. The reason I have a salvager here is so that I can salvage on the go, because as I told you guys before, a lot of the ISK you get from these new emerging conduits comes from the salvage. So while I'm killing people, I'm able to use this salvager to salvage on the go. The reason you do not want to use salvage drones, first of all, with the Rattlesnake it won't make much sense to use the salvage drones, because the salvage drones will obviously make so that you can't use your attack drones, and then you'll obviously be doing the site slower. But if you are for any other reason using a different ship that doesn't use drones, you wouldn't want to use your salvage drones at the same time, because the Triglavians almost instantly kill drones that are salvaging their wrecks. If they see salvage drones salvaging wrecks, they'll almost instantly kill them. So you don't want to use salvage drones, otherwise you're going to lose them very quickly. So that's why if you're going to salvage mid-combat, always use an onboard salvager. And the reason the Rattlesnake is good for this is because it has an extra utility high. So I can't fit an extra missile launcher on this, so just this extra high slot here can be used for a salvager. Keep in mind though, when I say you should not use salvage drones, I mean during combat. Feel free to bring some salvage drones in your drone base so that you can salvage after you've killed all the enemies. The key point is that if you use salvage drones when enemy Triglavians are on the grid, the Triglavians are going to kill your salvage drones. I even have some salvage drones myself because it helps speed up salvaging when I've killed all the enemies. When it comes to your DPS, this is similar to how I run the Abyss. It's basically crank out as much DPS as possible that can be applied as good as possible while still having a good tank. So your number one priority is to have the good tank, and then after you've achieved a good tank, just cram in as much DPS as possible as you can into the ship, and also make sure you have a decent amount of applicability in that DPS. Do not use torpedoes. Torpedoes will apply really bad to the small stuff, and also will have really bad range. You want to probably have at least 40 kilometers range like I've got here, because the ships can move about a bit, so you always want to have a bit of range. Also, the Triglavians have resist holds in the thermal and explosive damage type. It's about 2% less resistance in the explosive type, so your primary resistance you'd want to aim for is the explosive type. The Rattlesnake has a bonus to thermal missiles, and it's only 2% difference between thermal and explosive, so it's better that I just use the thermal missiles, because these are a lot stronger than explosive missiles on a Rattlesnake, and there's hardly any difference in terms of the Triglavian's resistance. I could use some kind of omnidirectional tracking link in the midst to make my drones apply better, but honestly, with my skills, I never have any issues applying with my heavy drones to the small ships. There's no real need to have any kind of application mods, because you already apply pretty well with the Rattlesnake in terms of the heavy drones and the heavy missiles, and in all honesty, you're fighting mainly big stuff as well, so it's just better to use the slots for tank and damage. Alright, so how do you run the emerging conduits? Well, you find it on your probe scanner as you see here, and then you just warp to it and make sure you bring your ship that is ready to fight, because enemies will spawn shortly after you warp in there. When you warp into the Emerging Conduit, you're going to want to warp again within the Emerging Conduit, and that is to warp to a rock that's just over 150 kilometers away. This is to get your ship to land directly onto the Triglavian spawn point, which is that red looking wormhole object in the center of this rock formations. So find a rock on the mining tab that's just over 150 kilometers away, about 152, 153, something like that, and then warp within 70. This will take you directly on top of the spawn point, and make sure that this rock forms a straight line between this where you warp into the Emerging Conduit and the Triglavian spawn point. As you see here, I warp directly on top of or almost directly on top of the spawn point. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just as long as you're a lot closer, because this will speed up your site clearing a lot faster, because you won't have to wait for the Triglavians to approach you. You'll just be able to apply damage straight away. Also, after you've warped next to the spawn point, directly deploy your MTU and make sure you bookmark it so you don't forget it, or in case you forget it. The MTU will pull Rex in and make it a lot easier to gather the loot. If you're experimenting with what kind of fit to use or how much tank you should use, like you're using the safe fit I linked, and then you want to tweak and see on the go what will fit or what will tank the best, then you'd also deploy your mobile depot right now. Then you'll be able to refit whenever you want to in the fitting tab. That is as simple as locking up the enemies and shooting the biggest ones and then the smallest ones last. The reason I want you to destroy the biggest ones first is because sometimes the site can end and it's hard to predict exactly when it's going to end, and by killing the bigger ships first, you not only are reducing the incoming DPS as well as the neuting capabilities, because the battleship newts a lot more than the small ships, you also are securing the loot of the bigger ships, and the bigger ships tend to drop a lot bigger loot as well as give more salvage. If you're using drones, keep a sharp eye on your drone HP. If it starts going down, immediately recall them and keep them in your bay for a few seconds, then you can deploy them again. The Triglavians really hate drones and can kill them pretty quickly if you don't pay attention. As you can see, with the current fit, I'm not having any difficulties having a stable capacitor, as well as my shielding is barely dropping by any percentage points at all. Ninja salvaging is a big issue when running Emerging Conduits. The thing is, you can see here that there's Gnosis and he's just salvaging my loot, and obviously he's stealing from me, and you don't get any criminal time from salvaging other people's loot. It's perfectly legal for people to do that, and people will eventually do that to you when you're running Emerging Conduits. So it's really up to you how you can deal with this. You could just stop running the site and come back later. That's what I usually do. Usually they've lost interest. Another alternative could be to just on purpose use your missiles to blow up the wrecks, and then they'll obviously lose interest in due time. Otherwise, it's an annoying thing, and you have to find your own way to deal with it. Really, you can get creative. Sometimes they go suspect and you can shoot them. It's really up to you. When you finish the site and kill all the bad guys, then it's just a case of salvaging all the loot and obviously grabbing everything from your MTU. What I use the salvage drones along with my onboard salvager to speed up things. When it comes to using the salvage drones, I put a single individual salvage drone per wreck. This seems to go very fast. Also, this is a prime time you'll get ninja salvagers, because there is still a risk that the Triglavians will switch to a ninja salvager and try to shoot them, but if they wait until you've completed the site, there's absolutely no risk and they can just steal all your salvage. This is also another reason why the onboard salvager is good, because I'm able to now reduce the amount of wrecks present when I finish the site, meaning that lesser risk that people who are looking for a quick and easy cash grab by just looking for a completed site and just grabbing all the loot, there'll be less wrecks there for them to salvage if I've already been salvaging during the battle. As you can see here, I'm just AFKing and waiting for the next site to spawn. There's about a delay of 10 minutes between each Emerging Conduit to respawn after one's being completed, and this is a good time to do some other kind of activity. For example, I'd strongly recommend you do some product discovery. You not only can help fight coronavirus, but you can also earn some dank ISK as well as these cool rewards in game. I understand why they kind of have this respawn timer, because it prevents the sites to be overfarmed and make the loot be worth nothing. So it's up to you to get a little creative for what you're doing in the meantime. Anyway, that's it for the guide on how to run the new Emerging Conduits. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please leave a like and subscribe. I'll catch you guys later.